Alright, I think I am live. Let me double check. Hi everybody! Let's see here. Just making sure everything looks good on my other devices. Can you guys hear me or see me? Oh, there we go. Alright, hi guys! Okay. Alright, can you guys hear and see me okay? Hello! Oh, I see people jumping on. Welcome, welcome. Oh, I'm not sure why that is. Let me see if I can jiggle some of the connections here.
Everybody else hears it.
Oh, I'm not sure. Can you guys hear any feedback? Is it making any weird noise or can you hear me okay? Nancy says, yep, they can hear me. That's good. My iPad keeps getting interrupted, but I don't know if it's the internet on the iPad or if it's my streaming internet. Is yours interrupting?
It did once, but not anymore.
Okay, I'm going to turn my Wi-Fi off on my phone. Alright. Nancy says there's a slight buzz. Huh. I haven't had that happen before.
That's what I was hearing.
Turn my Wi-Fi off.
Slight buzz. Here.
Oh, that's very strange. Okay, I'm just going to have to talk loud enough so that you can hear above it. Sorry about that, guys. I'm not sure why it's doing it. I use this mic for everything, so I'm not sure if it's not connected all the way in. Try jiggling the connections here. Hey Heather, how are you? Let's see, I have my iPad set up. Leslie says, sounds good here in Texas. Awesome, thanks for joining us. Hi Karen, hi Taisha. Alright. Dad's watching too, hi. Alright. So, I just went on a minute or two early just to make sure everything was going good, and so we'll get started in just a few minutes. Hey Evelyn! Welcome in, guys. I'm so excited to be demonstrating here. Thank you so much to the frosting creators and Melinda for asking me to do this. This is a really, really amazing event, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. The demos have been amazing so far. Have you guys been watching? Are you going to go back and watch? So all of the ones that I've seen are just incredible, all of the different things that everybody's been demonstrating. I love to see all the new things. Hey, Patricia. All right. Yeah, right where you're watching from in the comments so we can get to know each other. That'd be super duper fun. Let me just make sure this is all good here. Alright. Perfect. Oops. Alright, oh yeah, and don't forget to share the broadcast too. This is a public video, so you'll be able to share it with all of your sugar friends. Alright, I'm going to go off the broadcast on my iPad for a second and come back on just because I think my connection on there is buffering for some reason. Hey Melinda! Alright. Okay. Everything looks good on there, Mom? It's all good. Hey Carol! Hi Nicole! Oh, thank you! Alright, so we are going to go ahead and get started. I'm really excited to be here today to show you guys the Isomalt Carousel. I do have the piece right behind me, so I'm going to carefully pick that up to show you what we are creating today. I'm going to do this very gently. Ta-da! So it is on a rotating base, as you can see. It's slowly rotating around there. But we are going to be creating this is 100% out of Isomalt. So there's no other mediums used, there's no structure or anything. It is designed to build all into itself, but I'm going to tell you how you can use it with other mediums as well, because you definitely can. But I'll be showing it in Isomalt and then just explaining all the different ways that you can use it. But you can see all of my little carousel animals there. And it's going to be super duper cute, so I'm excited to show you guys that. Let me gently set this back down. Alright, turn that off for now. Oh, thank you. So in the comments, Mom is moderating for me. She's going to put the link to the supply list. So I do a live stream every month on my page, Simi Cakes and Confections. And so I do like a play date where everybody can work along or you can go back and watch. And so I do create like a supply list and even a kit for the different projects. And we teamed up with the Frosting Creators this month to do this as our play date for the month. So if you're interested in working along with me or going back and making the piece afterwards, the supply list will be in a link in the comments. So definitely follow that and bookmark the page so that you can get back to it or print it out. Or if you got the accessory kit that I did create for this previously, it comes with the supply list as well. So you can get it in there as well, and the or the kit is available afterwards too. It'll be on my website, so you can go back and get it if you want, because we do, with all the Isomalt and the mat all together, we put it at a little bit of a discount. So if you want to create this project with me, or go back and watch it and make it on your own time, you definitely can. All right, just making sure. Oh, good. Trisha got her kit yesterday. I cannot wait to see what you make. Becky says excited to make this. Yay! And make sure when you guys make this piece that you post it and you tag me, or you post it in the Simi Torch team. The Simi Torch team is our online Facebook group. It's totally free, so if you want to join, it's really fun to see each other's pieces when we go along and make a project together like this. So definitely post your pictures because I would love to see what you guys make. All right, so yeah, we are making the carousel today, so we're going to jump right into it because there's lots of different pieces and ways that we put everything together. So to make the carousel, we're going to be using the sculpture mat. So this is a Simi sculpture mat. We designed these to be basically a one-stop shop to create a sculpture. So they're all 2D pieces, but they're going to go together to create a 3D sculpture. Now these can be used with Isomalt, but they can also be used with chocolate, fondant, gum paste, even baking cookies in these. You can actually put your dough right in them, bake the whole mat in the oven to whatever your dough's recipe is, and then take it out and put the cookie together that way as well, which is super unique. So if you are more into cookies rather than making like a chocolate or Isomalt cake topper, this will definitely work great for you to create those 3D pieces. So this is the only mold that we are going to be using for this project because it has all of the different pieces and all the structure supports that we need. We're just going to pour it a few times in order to get the amount of pieces that we need. There are multiples of some of them on the mat, but of course the mat would be way too big if we could do enough of the pieces to just pour it all in one go. So you just need to make these a couple of times, but it also depends on your design how many pieces you need to make, which I will of course walk you through the whole time. I'm just checking, if you see me lean out of the shot, I'm just checking my iPad to see the comments. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat and I will be happy to answer them. I'll be checking it as well as Mom Michelle is here too. She will be going over the comments and making sure I don't miss anything. So if you have a question, please don't hesitate to ask. I am always happy to answer your questions about the project. All right, so first off, we're going to be using Isomalt today, like I said, even though the mat can be used with other mediums. Of course, Isomalt is my favorite. So we're going to be using Simi Isomalt. It is pre-cooked and ready to use, so all you have to do is melt it. There is no temperatures or recipes or anything at this point. You just pop it in the microwave for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals after that. You don't want to stir it or anything. You just let it do its thing in the microwave until it comes to a boil. So that's how I melt all of my Isomalt. You can also do it over the stove if you prefer. Just slowly bring the temperature up from low, creeping it up and up until it comes to a nice soft boil. And yeah, basically you're just going to melt it and go. Again, there's no temperatures or recipes with this, which makes it really easy, really user-friendly no matter what skill level you're at. So, all right. I'm going to tilt my camera down so that you guys can see what we are doing, of course, and we will go ahead and get started. All right. So we have our mat here, and now as you can see, it has all of the different cavities. So we have our base pieces, we have our roof, we have our animals, and then some of the decoration and the other support pieces as well, in these different size rectangles and ovals. And of course, to finish the whole thing off, we have our little flag. All right, so like I said, we're going to be pouring this in different colors of Isomalt, but we're going to do it all Isomalt. So again, we just melt the tiles for 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals until it is a liquid. Remember that Isomalt is very hot, so as you are melting it in the microwave, wear your gloves. Don't follow my bad example. Make sure you're wearing your gloves. Usually I recommend a cotton glove and then like a nitrile or a latex glove over top of that. That's just going to buffer the heat and keep everything from sticking as well, but still be careful, of course. I know a lot of people are intimidated by Isomalt when you start, but if you make cakes or cookies, you use ovens and stoves every day, right? You're used to working with heat. You just want to protect your hands and of course be cautious as you're working with it, but you'll build your confidence up the more and more that you use this for sure, just like, when you learned how to use ovens and stoves. All right, just checking the comments. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, good. Mom just posted under my name that link to the supply list, so if you want to go back and make this piece, definitely do. Also, if you get the sculpture mat, it does come with instructions. So I made a step-by-step tutorial, essentially, written tutorial with instructions and pictures of how you put the whole thing together. So you will have that to go along with as well. But there's a couple of pieces in this setup that are really helpful to actually see. So I wanted to, you know, just kind of have that as an extra to go back and reflect on and kind of reference. But I just have that there for the numbers and things like that as we are working. It's nice to just have both a visual and the video to go along with. So we're going to be pouring this, so it is all made out of silicone. It's high heat, so we don't need to prep this with anything. We don't need to grease it or powder it or anything. All right, I'm going to pop my Isomalt in. I had it pre-warming, but it has gotten a little bit too cool to pour now. So again, we just pop it in the microwave, 30 seconds and then 15-second intervals. Now we are going to be using two different colors of Isomalt today. We are going to be using a clear red and we're going to be using a pearl. So the clear red, if you got the accessory kit, it's already colored for you, so you don't need to worry about this step. But if you are working from your clear Isomalt, maybe you have already on hand, you definitely can color. So for the red, because I wanted it transparent, I'm using an airbrush color. So of course I'm using my Simi color Splash Candy Apple Red airbrush color. I just put a couple drops in there and stirred it in after it was melted. Airbrush color, this is a water-based, but you can also use alcohol-based airbrush colors. They are going to be the best for transparent effects. If you want a more solid effect, you can use powders. So when I colored my pearl, I used petal or luster dust. So you can use petal or luster dust, but this is sterling pearl from the Sugar Art Super Pearl. So just a nice brilliant luster dust mixed in. So dusts are going to give you a more opaque finish, whereas liquid colors give you a more see-through, glassy finish. The one thing you never ever want to mix into Isomalt though is gel colors, because gel color will break down the Isomalt and not allow it to dry properly. Okay, so you can see I've taken that red first. It doesn't really matter which one you start with because we're going to pour both of them. So I've taken that red and I brought it to a boil. You see how it's bubbling in there, but I'm going to let that settle so that all the bubbles come out. While that is settling, I'm going to pop the pearl into the microwave to get that preheated as well. Alright, so like I said, I do bring it to a boil. That step is really important because hot air rises. So if you did have any bubbles mixed in from either stirring it, if you had to stir it to mix in color or flavor, or if you had any bubbles mixed in just, you know, as the Isomalt melted, it may get little air pockets, hot air will rise. So if you bring it to a boil, the hot air rises to the top and then pops, and you'll be left with crystal clear Isomalt, but only if you let it settle. So if you bring it to a boil and immediately pour it, it's going to just pour all the bubbles into the piece. But if we bring it to a boil and then let it sit for just a few minutes at room temperature before we pour, it's going to help all the bubbles dissipate. Now there's another reason why we always want to let this settle for this specific mold, and even any silicone mold that's a lot bigger and smoother, but you can see these are larger, very flat, smooth pieces, and that's going to be because of the pores of the silicone. So basically all silicone has pores. It's just like skin, and from heat they open up. Okay, if it gets too hot in one spot, whether your Isomalt was uneven, maybe the microwave heated it unevenly, or you heated it a little bit too long and got it too hot, if the pores open up too much from too much heat, it can get the Isomalt stuck down in them. So as it cools and they close back down, it actually grabs onto the Isomalt and doesn't want to release. So it's very important not to pour the Isomalt too hot in these, and also in between layers you want to let the mat cool. So you can put a little fan, like I have my battery operated fan. I could, after I unmolded all my pieces, I could let it cool with the fan to rush it a little bit, or I can just have it kind of sit off to the side in a cool room. You don't want to put it in the fridge or the freezer because of the moisture and condensation, but just let it cool for a little while, which usually you have to anyway to reheat your Isomalts to do your second round. So just make sure that you're not getting too much heat. Now if that happens that you do get a stuck spot, so let's say everything is releasing, it's popping right out, but one little spot just kind of doesn't feel like it wants to let go, it's okay. It's not going to ruin your mold as long as you don't pull on it. You don't want to rip it out of the mat because then you chance ripping the silicone. So what I do is I take out all the pieces I can, and that one little spot with the Isomalt, I just run it under some cool water. It literally jumps right off. It doesn't stick or anything after you put that water on. It helps it to release, and you can still use the mat. You just dry it off and use it again, and you just re-pour that piece and you know, just make it again. And it usually doesn't stick in the same spot twice. It's really just about that heat getting, you know, in those silicone pores. So just making sure you're not pouring it too hot and that you are in a nice cool room, of course, will help with the air circulation. All right, Good, that pearl is nice and cooled. Now, if you do rip your mats, worst comes to worst, it's not the end of the world because silicone does mend itself really nicely in the finished pieces. So even if you have a little rip or a little indent somewhere and you pour the Isomalt over that, obviously make sure it's not going to pour out underneath if it went all the way through. But if you just had a little mar in the surface of a silicone, it's really not the end of the world with Isomalt because when you take it out, you just lightly torch over the finished piece and it will smooth away any imperfections. So silicone and Isomalt are very forgiving. So it is going to be no problem if you do accidentally get a little spot, but of course if you follow those steps you won't have any problem with that. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to pour certain sections certain colors. So of course this is subjective, you could do whatever colors you like, but I will show you what I like to do for mine. So with the red, I'm going to be pouring some of my triangles. So we'll do one pearl and one red for this. So I'm just moving around, letting that red fill up, and in between pouring each piece, even if I'm going to pour multiples in one color, I like to spread it in between, because if you pour all of them and then go back and try and spread it, sometimes with especially the smaller pieces, it'll cool too fast for you to be able to spread it efficiently. So I like to pull it into the little details with my silicone tool, or you can use a toothpick as well, or a skewer, and then I pour the next one. Okay, so I poured one of my triangles there, and then I'm also going to pour, let's see, we'll pour one of these rectangles. And of course you can do both one color just to get more done of that color, and then go back with the pearl ones afterwards. I'm doing I'm doing all one color, but most of the pieces, like for the roof and things like that, I'm going to alternate red and pearl. So let's see what else we want. I want the ovals. Both of those can be red because we're going to make all of those red here. I'm also going to do one of these rectangles. And the ovals I don't really have to spread because there's no harsh points to it, so you'll notice I just went ahead and started on my rectangle piece because these don't usually need to be spread unless you don't pour enough. Okay, we're also going to pour our cute little flag. All of these pieces we're letting cool all the way down until they are completely solid, except for the flag because we want to add a little bit of movement. Of course, like the flag is blowing in the wind. Now you can see I poured a little bit over the side of the flag just then, but that's okay because these lines are so thick and so prominent of each of the cavities, it actually adds like a score mark. So if you accidentally overflow, usually it separates on its own, or it's really easy to break off afterwards when you unmold everything. So no worries if you overflow it. But of course with Isomalt, the best part is in the worst case scenario, if you do overflow it a lot, you can just throw it back in the bowl and remelt it and do it again. So nothing wasted. Alright, now before I go to pour my pearl, I am going to just lightly torch away any bubbles. So always keep moving with the torch and you won't hurt anything. Okay, so see how I just lightly went over the whole thing, and that is just going to help to pop any bubbles. Sometimes you get stray bubbles that rise to the top, so I just popped any surface bubbles. It's good to do that now because it's liquid, so when the bubbles pop, it will flatten back over afterwards and you will be able to have a nice smooth surface. And if you were to let these cool before you pop those bubbles with the torch, the bubbles would pop, but there's no liquid to fill them back over, so you just end up with little craters on the surface. So I always pop those while it's liquid so it can level itself back out. Alright, now we have this beautiful pearl color. You can kind of see the shimmeriness. You'll see it even more once we start pouring. And we're going to pour our base piece here. I also like to move around as I'm pouring just so I'm not kind of pouring in one spot and building up the heat in that area too much. Okay, I'm going to use the other end of my silicone tool now to just spread that. And this kind of pearlized look will hold the shape that it has right now. So if you want to swirl it around a little bit, and you'll be able to see that a little better once I can hold it up when it's cool. But I just put like a little design in the pearlescence on the surface. Next, I'm going to pour one of my triangles. And then the other pieces are pretty small, so I am going to still pour them with the pearl, but I want to pour some into a smaller bowl. And that will just help me with some dexterity. So before I stop, I'm just going to lightly pop any bubbles there. And now I'm going to switch. I have a little bowl that I was using just a little bit ago, so it has a little bit of pearl Isomalt in it still. But I'm going to pour some of my liquid pearl into that bowl and reheat that, because when you're doing smaller pieces, it's going to help to have it much more liquidy. So I'm just going to take this pearl in the smaller bowl, pop it back in the microwave for another maybe 20 to 30 seconds, and then we'll pour the more detailed pieces. Okay, guys have any questions so far? Everybody doing good? Hi, Pamela. What's that?
How many rounds?
The big rounds?
How many?
So yeah, we will have to make multiples of these. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to want to make, here I have my little cheat sheet over here. So you're going to want to make 3 of the base circles, so 3 of the big circles. You're going to need 6 roof triangles, so I will have 3 of each color because I'm going to alternate them. You're going to need 6 of the skinny outer beams over here, which I'm about to pour next. You're going to need 7 oval roof decorations, 3 to 6 animals, depending on how many you want in your piece. I'm going to do 4 today, but you guys will be able to stack them differently, which I'll show when we put it together. We're going to need 6 of the roof border decorations, the scalloped one over here. 6 short rectangle base supports, so that's these shorter little rectangles over here, which I'll also alternate colors. And then 6 of the longer rectangles, which are going to create the pillar that go down the center, and 1 flag. So the flag will go at the very top of the piece. All right. And like I said, all of that information comes with the mat, so you'll have that on the paper here. Okay, so you can see that pearl is melted, but it's still bubbling, so I want to wait a couple of minutes for all of the bubbles to settle before I pour it. I am going to use my silicone tool a lot here, so I want to make sure it's ready. I have some Isomalt on the end, so I'm just going to pop that off now that it's totally cool. Of course, don't grab it off with your hand if it's still warm, but these have been sitting out for a couple minutes, so it's totally solid now. I can just put that back in. Okay, and like I said, you can also use a toothpick or a skewer for this as well. I just have my silicone tools on hand. They're a little easier, plus they're reusable. All right, so again, I'm practicing my patience skills because I don't want to pour this too hot, so I'm letting all the bubbles stop. You know that it's ready when you don't see any more bubbles rising or popping or moving, especially if you kind of give it a little swirl. Sometimes it'll release more bubbles that start to rise that you didn't see at first. So that's how you know it's done. If your bubbles are just sitting there on the surface and they haven't moved or popped, those are okay. Those are just little stray bubbles that we can pop later, but they shouldn't be actively moving or popping or rising. That's how you know that it's ready, when all of that stops. All right. So now you'll have to pick what kind of animals you want to do. Now what we did is we have a little bit of variety. So if you want your carousel to be more of a jungle, you know, more wildlife of all different kinds, you can do all different kinds. So we have a dolphin, we have a horse, and we have an elephant. So if you wanted it to be more of like an under the sea themed, like maybe you have like an ocean themed but still very whimsical sort of carnival, you could do all dolphins and make them different colors, maybe make some pinks or purple ones, make it really pretty for like a baby shower or something like that. Would be pretty in like pastel ocean colors. You can do all horses, of course, if you want to go for the traditional look and do them in different colors as well. You can even paint them to get different styles of horses if you wanted to. Or if you wanted it more jungle themed, you could do all elephants. Or you can, of course, do a combination like I'm going to do if you want all sorts of animals in your jungle here today. All right, so that's kind of up to you of which ones you want to pour, but just for time's sake, we're going to do all of them. So I will go ahead and pour my other little rectangles over here. Pour this guy too. Sometimes if you're fast enough, you can pour two before you spread it into the details, but I'm really only doing that because it is still quite hot. So as you work with it longer and longer, you'll notice that it's going to get cooler and cooler. So as soon as it starts fighting you, it feels a little bit too thick, maybe it's creating cotton candy strings when you are trying to spread it with your tool, then you know that you need to re-microwave it. Okay. And you can pour all of these at once. You don't have to only do certain ones and then do the others. You can have all these cavities filled at the same time. Okay, we're going to pour the little poles that are going to go on the outside, these tiny little rectangles. And I just go nice and slow with this, and it may take a couple tries with these because they are so tiny, but again, that little bowl is going to make all the difference. So the smallest silicone bowl you have, and we're just going to stop between each, and then I'll go back and spread it into the fine corners. All the way down, there we go. Okay, so just spread those in, and then last but not least, we will do our animals. Alright. I'll do my Dolphin first. Pour that in, and it's on the little base that will attach to the bottom as well. And I like to go back and paint these rather than trying to pour these in different colors. So let's say I wanted to make like the rod at the bottom a different color, like gold or silver. I would go back and paint it, which I will show you guys a little bit later because we're going to add some gold accents, rather than trying to pour them different colors. With something so flat like this, it is going to want to run all over the place and not be perfect lines. So if you're going for like a tie-dye marble effect, that would work really good, but if you're going for more of a perfectly detailed effect, then you definitely want to paint afterwards. So we'll talk about that in a little while. Okay, so I'm just roughly pouring it in, and then I really spread it to those details with the tool. That's easier than trying to pour a teeny tiny little bit up into the trunk here and like the hooves of the horse. Alright, so now we're just going to go over it, pop any final bubbles, and we let it cool. So this will take around 10 to 15 minutes for the different pieces to cool. It depends how cool your room is, and it also depends which pieces you're pouring, because of course you won't have to pour all the pieces over and over. Some of them you only need 3, some of them you need 6, you know, things like that. So depending on how many pieces are in the mat at a time will also hold more heat. This will take a lot longer than just pouring one of them, because there is so much heat just in this area. So it'll take anywhere from like 10 to 15 minutes for these to set up. But of course that flag we are going to keep an eye on. So I'm just going to poke it with my silicone tool to see. And actually, I think it is okay now. So you can see the smaller ones, especially because I poured it more towards the beginning, don't take long at all. I'm going to try not to disturb any of the other pieces, but I do want to take this out while it's still a little bit warm. It's still a tiny bit bendy. So I took that one out, but we'll slide this guy over to cool, and I will show you unmolding those after they cool down. But while we let that cool, let's go ahead and bend our flag here. So the flag, first off, we want to clean up some of the rough edges. So I have a little bit, let's see if I can get it so you can see it, like on the tip of the flag, it's not perfectly straight, just from spreading it into the mold, sometimes you get some roughness. So what I'll do first is I'll just torch over all of the edges. Okay, it just smooths them over a little bit and cleans up any areas that looked rough. At this point, after you wait about 5 or 10 seconds and you have gloves on, you could, after torching, pick it up and cut off any areas that maybe you overflowed, or you can break them off before you torch, because that'll be easier when it's cold. Okay, now the flagpole is very thin, so it looks like it's melted a little bit more than the rest of the piece. So I'm going to use my little fan to help me out to cool it down a little so I can release it. We're not trying to move the flagpole, because of course that's going to be pretty stagnant, nice and straight, but we want to add the motion to the actual banner part of the flag. That would be fabric.
Patricia says that she can tell you've done this before.
Just a few times I've done this before. No, I've done this a lot of times, which is why it helps, you know, after going through it a few times, you get like the little tricks with this. And pouring it, of course, is going to be very similar how I just did to pouring any silicone mold. The keys to this piece is really in the assembly and the little things and tricks that I wanted to show you. So I'm going to heat now from the back of the flag only on the banner part so that it will soften more there. Since it's thicker there, it's going to take a little more heat than the flagpole did. So I only focused the heat in this area here. Pick it up. And I'll feel it. If it doesn't feel pliable enough yet, I will wait, but it does feel pretty pliable, so I'm just going to add a little bit of a fold there. Look how cute that is. And then I'll hold it in front of my fan while just maintaining the shape and the straightness of the flagpole to let it cool down. The fan really helps to cool things. You don't want to use freeze spray or the fridge or the freezer, again, because of the moisture and the condensation. And with freeze spray, it actually will shock the Isomalt too much when it's warm, so it can shatter it or add little hairline splinters all over the piece, which of course you don't want for this look. So I'm just going to cool this gradually with my little fan, just a little battery operated fan from Amazon. Alright. Sometimes you get little wrinkles. You can probably see that in between here. You get little like stretch marks from folding it. So after this is all the way cooled down, I can lightly go back and just melt those away from the surface. Let me see how now those are mostly gone. I could do another round of it. You just don't want to heat too much at once so that you don't re-soften the whole thing. Alright. Now, we're going to be assembling this next. Of course, we're going to go a little bit out of order just because it will take a while for those pieces to cool down. So I've pre-made pieces to put this whole thing together, but I will show you taking them out of the mold and cleaning them up a little bit when they are done, because they will be done before we are finished assembling. So I will show you that, but we are going to do it a little bit out of order than I would normally, of course, do this, just because I don't want to make you guys sit here and wait with me while those cool down and I make a few more rounds of those. But it really doesn't take long because there are multiples of each of the designs on the mat. So even though you need 6 of something, you don't necessarily need to pour it 6 times because there's 2 or 3 of a lot of the shapes. Okay. All right, so I'm going to grab some of my pieces here. Let's clean up some of the little dots of Isomalt off the mat. Any questions so far, guys? Is everybody doing good? So I poured these about an hour or 2 ago, and so I have them just in Ziplocs. I didn't glaze them or anything yet because I didn't want them to have a harder time going together because the glaze will create a barrier. So I just made some of the base pieces and all of the decorations and everything as much as I will need, and now we're going to start putting those together. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to need is we need one of our base circles. Okay, so I'm going to grab that. And I'm going to grab our 6 shorter rectangles. It's a little slippery, be careful. Okay, so we're going to grab our 6 shorter rectangles, so this size here. And I did them alternating colors. You could do them all one color, of course, or you can go different colors with this. I made extras, so I'll only need 3 of each of those. But yeah, if you wanted to go more like really pretty soft colors, you know, maybe like cotton candy colors would be really nice. You could go more elegant and do like golds and silvers. You know, you can play around with this. Alright, so we're going to alternate our colors here. Oh, I missed a pearl one, didn't I? Let me grab out another pearl. There we go. So I just kept them in the sealed bag because we are in Florida here, so it's very, very humid, and I don't want any stickiness to happen while I'm waiting to put this together, so I just sealed them in a Ziploc. Alright, so next up we are going to torch to put them together. Now first off, to make sure they're in the right spot, I'm going to set these corner to corner on top of the base to see where they all fit in. Sometimes you need to spread them wider apart or push them closer together. So the inside corners is where it's actually going to stand up, so it'll stand up like this. So I'm just trying to make sure that they're all even. Doesn't have to be perfect at this point, you just want to have an idea of where it's going. Okay, so you can see all the inside corners are matched up there, and it looks fairly centered as well. They're not all off to the side of the circle underneath. And now what we're going to do is you can either do this on top or you can lift it and then put it back into place, which is what I like to do so I don't accidentally stick them together. But I'm just going to heat really well on both pieces, and then we're going to stand it straight up. Now these do glue together pretty fast, but if you need to, you can hold the fan up to it for a few seconds to help it. I like to do the fan at the end because if I cool something in place and then I accidentally realize that it is in the wrong place, I want to be able to move all of them if they still have some wiggle room. So I don't really purposely cool it down until I know they're all in the right spots. Okay, so I can start torching the corners as well, you know, the sides where they're going to go together, as well as the bottom. But just be really careful as you're grabbing these. You'll definitely still want to wear your gloves so that you don't accidentally touch anywhere that you just torched. This is going to be the very base of the carousel. Alright, and then last but not least, put that one right up to it. Alright. Okay, so this is the base. You can see I just have my flat pieces put together here, so when you look at it, it's going to look like this on the bottom, so everything's going to stack up on top of it. Right, so we have our base here. That we're going to leave to cool for a little while, and just make sure that everything's good. Hey Karen, how's it going? Alright, so we'll leave that to cool off to the side for now while we put together our next pieces, which is going to be kind of the spoke, if you will, in the middle of the carousel. So it's going to create the center pole that will hold up the roof. So we're going to grab 3 of these skinnier, not the really, really skinny pieces, but the kind of in-between rectangles here. So 3 and 3. Alright, and we are going to arrange these in 2 halves. So one of them, because I'm alternating colors, the reds are going to be on the outside, and one of them, the whites, are going to be on the outside with the red down the middle. So you see how I just made 2 alternates. And we're going to put these together, and then quickly we're going to fold them into a half circle. So we want to do this while the whole thing is warm. Again, I recommend the gloves for this so that you can pick it up and not have to worry about touching something you just torched. But basically we're just going to heat. You can do one at a time if you want, but just for time's sake, I'm going to heat both, stick them all together, and then while it's warm, we're going to bend this into a half circle. Okay, looking at it from the side too, making sure they're fairly straight. See that? It's okay if it's not completely perfect because we can tweak it a little bit once we put it together. But just making sure we have kind of that half circle shape. And then doing the same thing over here. Again, I'm not cooling it down completely until I have the whole thing together in case I want to rewarm it. So bending these same way, and then we're just going to heat both of the halves and attach them together into a circle. So it's okay if the shape's not perfect at first. I just want to get them bonded at the edges, and then I go back while the whole thing is warm, and I'll just make sure that it's flat. If it's not totally level, it's not the end of the world because we're going to be melting this to attach it, so we can melt one side more than the other and force it to be level if needed. Look how cool that is. So that's going to be our center support that's going to hold up both of the roof and the base and attach them together. Okay, so there'll be another disc on top of this piece, but it'll go right in the middle. There. Alright, so just breezing right through this to make sure we have everything together by the end. So next up we're going to attach that middle spoke with the other 2 circles. So I'm going to just cool this down while I get the other circles out to help it to solidify. I don't like to cool these down to cold. I just want to cool them down till they're not really warm anymore. So more like room temperature rather than warm. And that's going to help with making sure that when you take the torch to it, if it's cold, it's going to, it could crack it because cold to hot, just like with glass, Isomalt can shatter. So we just want to make sure it's more down to room temperature, not necessarily ice cold. Okay, so these are the 2 pieces that we're going to use next. Okay. Right. And there is different ways. I mean, you could put this disc on and then build it up and things like that, but I prefer to do it this way, again, just because I have done this a bunch of times, so it's going to help with syncing and making sure everything's leveled this specific way. This is kind of the way that I engineered to put it together, just through experience and doing it over and over, that I found is going to work easiest. Okay, so that's cooled down, so I know it's not going to separate. Okay, we're going to attach the center spoke to the bottom and then attach it to the top after that. So we're going to torch both pieces really, really well. Now when I'm torching, especially on these thick pieces that are heavy, I am melting it almost so that I see bubbling, like I see the surface starting to melt. And then again, if your the top or bottom of this center tube was not totally level, this is when you can melt it a little more on one side or push it down a little more on one side. And then you just want to make sure it's in the middle so that when it goes around in a circle, it doesn't look like it's lopsided. Okay, so I just attached that one. I'm going to cool that for a second so that I can lift it and move it without worrying about it. And then we're going to attach the top spoke on before we put together the roof. So again, not getting ice cold, just helping it to solidify. Okay, now we're going to put the top one on. Now you can either attach it onto the top, or you can flip the top disc over and put the whole thing on the other side. It doesn't really matter which way you do. You can even put it kind of like this, but then it's a little harder to see the center. So what I'm going to do is flip this whole piece upside down, and then I will kind of get lower. If you're sitting, it helps you see it straight on, but I'll kind of squat down a little bit since I'm standing and just make sure that it looks centered. Once Isomalt is stuck, it is stuck, so you don't want to accidentally stick it in the wrong place. You only have a few seconds to make sure that it is in the middle, so I just want to make sure that it looks pretty centered and it feels pretty strong. I'm kind of jiggling it, even trying to pull it back off to make sure it's not going to pop off easily. Alright, so you have a big spoke right now. Kind of looks like a like when you get thread for a sewing machine and all the thread is gone. I'm sure there's a name for that. Okay, so I'm just making sure that's nice and stuck. It doesn't matter which side now that you use as the top or bottom, but I do try and remember which is which just for cooling's sake at this point. Alright, so cooling that down before we move on to our roof. Alright. So now I want to put together the roof, but I want to do it on a different silicone mat. Just because I'm going to be moving this around a lot, I like to use the more flexible mats. So I'm going to grab one of my softer yellow silicone mats for this. Okay, we're going to move those out of the way in a second, but let me get my pieces out first so I can put them here. So again, I'm going to alternate 3 of the red and 3 of the white. Black and white would be really pretty and classy for this piece too. If you wanted to do a black and white carousel, I think that would be really, really pretty. Alright, we're going to move these over here and work on this yellow mat. Alright, so again, we're going to alternate. And now you'll notice I am using torches for this. I'm not using liquid silicone or liquid Isomalt as a glue to put these together, and there is a reason for that, because you know, a lot of times you could use liquid Isomalt as a glue for things, but with something that's gravity defying and that's supporting its own weight, you want something that dries really fast. What happens with liquid Isomalt is it's really good because it melts into the surface of your pieces and helps it to bond stronger, but that also means that it's melting into the surfaces of previously cooled pieces, and it's going to re-warm them, essentially warm them back up and make them pliable. Since all these pieces are pretty thin, we don't want anything becoming pliable again and that could cause it to sag. Plus it's going to take a lot longer for it to cool because there's stress and weight put on the pieces, and so it's constantly trying to move it, which doesn't aid the cooling process. So that's why I'm using the torch instead. I'm just making sure I'm torching really, really, really well. Okay, so we're going to arrange these like an umbrella, okay? I just kind of put them, there is slight gaps between each, which is good because it's going to dome once it's all together. This is the part that really, really takes some kind of maneuvering and doing it a couple times to get that feel for it, but I'm going to show you guys what I do. So first off, I'm going to spread them apart a little bit once I figure out where they're all going. Okay, just a little, and I'm going to heat all of them. That's because if you heat the tips all together when they're touching, they're kind of hiding the tip of each because they're touching against it, so you can't get the heat between them. So I like to separate them before I push them back together so that all of the liquid Isomalt touches rather than just heating over the surface, if that makes sense. Next, we're going to, while it's liquid, we're going to stir this. So I'm taking my silicone tool and I'm stirring it together on the surface, and that's okay that it doesn't look as pretty anymore at the tip because we're going to be covering that up with the flag. So I'm just mixing those together at the top. Now I'm going to wait just a few seconds, and then I'm going to flip it over off of the mat, and I'm going to shape it. But you want to wait. You can just wait at room temperature. If you're impatient like me, you can use your fan to cool it down, but you don't want to wait too long because, of course, you don't want this to dry flat. You don't want it to harden. You just want it to be a little bit more set up so that when you pick it up, it's not going to be gooey or stretch apart. It's going to grab. So kind of the same idea as the flag. You want it to be slightly soft so you can bend it, but not so soft that it falls apart. So I just kind of wiggle these pieces as it's cooling to feel how set up it is, because you can feel how easily they move around. It's almost there. Okay, so we're going to flip this over, shape it and then attach it with the torch at the seams to make it extra strong. Okay, so we're going to, again, wear your gloves for this because just in case that was still a little warm, we're going to flip it and peel the mat away from the piece. Now we're going to cup our hands and help it to start to concave. You see this? Now, if it feels a little bit hard, because sometimes the underneath can cool faster since it's touching that cool silicone, you can lightly torch in the middle from the underneath as well. Just be careful not to get you. You'll notice I set it on my silicone mat for that step. Don't torch in your hands. Very important. So I'm just pressing them until all the gaps disappear. See that? So I'm going to hold this together for just a minute or two. You see I'm rotating and constantly moving it so that it doesn't accidentally bend to the shape of my hand in any specific slant. But I do want to take this apart here in a second and start to torch everything together. So I'm pulling apart one little gap. You see how there's a gap over here now? Carefully and quickly heating and then attaching those together permanently. I do that after I get the shape and not before I stick them all together because you don't want it to accidentally stick in the wrong spot as it's bending into this concave shape. You can always rewarm that center point if it feels like something is moving or stretching or not bending right. You can always re-soften it. Okay, and it's okay if they don't go perfectly level around the bottom edge because we're going to cover that up with our decorations. You just want it to be as close as possible. Okay. Now, sometimes when you go to reshift it, you'll hear a little crack of two pieces separating, so that's a good indication of where you needed to torch a little more. So it's actually good if that happens, because it's warning you that it needs a little more glue. So anywhere you see some gaps, or it feels like it's pulling apart, you just go back and re-strengthen it. You can now set it down and make sure it's all as level as possible. You can even pull the pieces apart here, or even just go over them anyway to help them to bond and warm up as you push them back together from the centers.
Nancy wants to know why she's holding her breath.
It is something that you're going to hold your breath for the first few times that you do it, but once you kind of get the right sequence of events of it folding over, it goes together pretty easily.
So, like the first time you do it, would you suggest maybe they just do one color?
Yeah, I would recommend just do a practice color. Yeah, so just do them all pearl or all red, and that way you can just remelt it afterwards and do it a couple of times. Okay, sometimes if you want to just realign those lines, if they get a little bit blurred, you can use like a little palette knife or a spatula to just help straighten those lines in between each. You do want to make sure that center is not falling. Can you see how it's almost pointing on the inside? I need to kind of push it back up so that it's not falling and collapsing since we added so much heat there. And then we're going to cool the whole thing, but especially that center point. Okay, now we can all let out our breath. That's definitely the most tricky part of the piece, in my opinion, is just making sure that it's all at the right levels and angles and it doesn't cool too much. But once you get that sort of temperature thing down, and really don't be afraid to use your torch. Your torch is your best friend with things like this, so you can potentially keep Isomalt warm indefinitely, but you have to keep reheating it. You have to keep re-softening it and making sure that it is staying pliable, because if you let it cool too much, it's not going to take the heat from the torch as well. So you have to keep on top of it with heating. Something cold is not going to heat as evenly as something warm, because the warm absorbs the heat better. Alright, so now we're just going to put our structure together and put our decorations on. And then I'll take out the pieces I had poured before. Okay, so it feels like it's not really collapsing anymore. It's still a little warm, but it's not in danger of moving as far as I can tell. So we're going to let that cool off to the side for a little while longer with the fan on it. And we will put together our base piece next. Alright. So now, if you did the alternating colors, make sure when you put these two on top of each other that the red is matched up with the red, or the white is alternated if you want it alternated. You see that, but make sure they're in the right spot, because if it's off a little bit, it can make the whole thing thrown off. So just make sure that you kind of purposely plan where it's going to go. Next step, we're going to heat a little bit on the disc, but not a ton because we don't want to collapse it. But warm to warm sticks better than warm to cool. So we're mostly getting the warmth on this piece here. Again, you can't really move it once it's on there, so try and get it in the right spot. Alright, that looks pretty good. Like that. Okay, mine's a little bit crooked, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay, there's that. Now we're going to attach on our roof. Okay, and I prefer, rather than putting the roof on top, I actually prefer flipping this whole thing over and attaching it to the inside because it's easier to see if it's in the center or not. So again, if you want to match up the red areas to the others, but it's not going to be as big of a deal with these pieces because they're a lot bigger, so they're not going to match up evenly no matter what you do. They're just going to be kind of a matching accent, not necessarily perfectly in line. So I'm just going to, again, only lightly heat this disc, not a ton, just enough so that warm sticks to warm a little easier than warm to cool, and only on the edges. This is going to sit inside of the edge of the umbrella a little bit, the umbrella top, so I'm not heating the edge, I'm heating maybe like a ½ inch in. Really, really well. Okay, and then kind of hovering the whole thing, and if it looks a little bit off, I can pull it apart. Kind of squat down here, and I'm just going to get it to the right spot, and sometimes you have to go back and reinforce it, so it didn't quite heat enough. So I'm mostly heating on the pearl areas because they're solid, so you won't see the glue attachment marks as much. Alright, so there we go. And again, it's okay if it's not perfectly level on this bottom edge because we're going to be putting our decorations on it. Alright. Okay, so I'm just jiggling it, making sure it feels nice and solid, and then we're going to cool this for a minute to make sure that it's nice and secure and the disc that's inside of here is not collapsing or caving in from the heat at the edges. So just cooling this off. And next up we are going to add our final decorations. So it's going to be the little roof decorations as well as the base. And the horses and things like that. So we'll let that cool there for a second with the fan while I get those ready. Okay. Alright, good. So let's grab these. Okay. Nope, I'm good. So we're going to use our roof decorations and just quickly put those on. And put our horses on as well. And now you can paint these pieces before you put them on if you want to, or you can do them after, whatever you like. Okay, so next up I'm going to put on my little roof decorations. So this is what we are going for, or what we are getting so far. It's going to be a little bit harder to see just because you guys are straight above, but I will hold it up as I go so that you can see what we're doing. So I'm just going to heat. I don't need to heat both pieces for these little decorations, so I'm only going to heat the edge of the umbrella top. And there's going to be a little gap between them because that is where the poles go all around it. So I'm just going to center it on the triangle. And then I'll hold it up so you can see. Alright, so this is where I'm kind of making sure, some of them I'm putting a little lower, some of them I'm putting a little higher on the actual piece, but they're all going to look level when you look at it. So it kind of covers up the edge you start with, and you can make your own level edge all the way around. Okay. There, and oh, I need one more. Okay, last one, and I'll hold that up before we go on to the next piece. And again, these are not very heavy, so it's not taking a lot to torch them on. There we go. And of course I'm going faster than I normally would just for time's sake, but we're going to go ahead and heat the base of the horses and attach those in. I'm just going to do 4 for my carousel today, but you could also stack them, you could layer them. Especially would be good if you're doing them in different colors. Add a little bit more heat to that one. Alright, so I'm just kind of attaching them in a square shape. I'm going to have the fan blowing across it too, just to help with cooling it before they fall over, since I'm going a little quick now. Alright. 3. Oop, I popped one off, but that's okay. Oh, just glue it right back on. These really bring the whole thing to life. Just make sure that they are all going in the same direction, because you want them to be going the way that the carousel is going to be spinning. So if you have a base that's spinning, make sure you check which way it's going to be spinning, or if you can adjust it, you know, to go different ways. Okay, next up, while those are cooling, I'm not going to hold that up yet because they are still cooling, but I'm going to put my little round discs on just in the middle of each of the roof decorations. And then the last step will be our structure poles and our flag. Alright. And the home stretch, guys. Anybody have any questions? Everybody doing okay? No problem. So you can see there's really not that many tools that you need for this. Of course, if you're going to do cookies, you would need a glue, so I would use Isomalt personally. Of course, because it will be really strong and dries really instantly. So that is always my method of choice to glue any 3D cookies together. You could use royal icing or something like that, but because of the nature of this, I just find it easier to use Isomalt, because then you can get it all put together really fast. That's how I put my gingerbread houses and things together as well.
I think this would be so cute at Christmas.
Yeah, for Christmas this would be really cute because you can do little wreaths as decorations. Remember, you can use other mediums as well. You don't have to use the design pieces on the mat. Instead of the roof decorations, you can make your own. Do little wreaths. You could do little flower bouquets for spring. You could do a pretty like sun and moon decoration. Lots of different things you can do. Okay, so let me get these on and then I'll hold them up before we put on our flag. So basically just torching at the attachment points. Alright. I don't want to hold this completely on its side, so I'm going to tilt the camera just a little. Look how pretty! Alright, so you can see I just put those ovals on, I put the bars on, the horses and animals in, and then the last step is going to be our flag. So I made a pearl version of the oval to kind of cover up that area. I'll have our flag over here to kind of cover up that attachment area. So we're going to heat the point, stick it right onto the top. Let me turn that down a little. So I just stuck it flat and then heat the end of the flag.
Tina Shetty said you could make it into a gazebo.
Oh, I love that idea. That would be so pretty for like a rustic wedding cake. Make like a southern gazebo. Alright, now you gotta try it, Tina. Okay, so I just attached the flag right to the top. And then if you wanted to paint it, you can use luster dust mixed with alcohol. You can use gel color at that point, is okay to paint on top. You just don't want to mix it in the Isomalt. You could use edible airbrushing, airbrush colors as paints, whatever you like to add the little details, or you don't have to paint it at all. I mean, it looks really pretty just having the light colors. So I'm going to tilt my camera back up so you guys can see from this angle. Carefully pick this up. Ta-da! So you can see all of those support pieces really bring it together on the outside, those pearl little tiny rectangles. I have my decorations on the top, my little animals in there. And then the last piece of the puzzle, of course, would be to glaze it. So I would spray this whole piece after I painted it with a clear, edible glaze spray. Just popped one of the little side pieces off. So I would spray it with a clear little edible glaze, and that's just going to seal everything. So it'll seal in the paint. It'll make sure that you don't get any stickiness or cloudiness or anything like that. And then if you wanted to put it on the rotating base, you can. The one that I used is just from Amazon, but there's lots of different ones out there that you can have on top of the cake. So you could recess that down in, or even cover it with some fondant to make it look like a little, like a pedestal for the piece to sit on top of your cake if you want it to blend in a little more, or you can use this as a centerpiece and put, you know, a cool dessert table around it. There's lots of different things, and of course, yeah, leaving out the animals, making a pretty gazebo, changing up the colors, making it more ocean theme with the dolphins or more jungle theme with the elephants. You could even hand sculpt or pipe, you know, different animals to make them 3D into there, like do like royalizing transfers or little modeling chocolate animals or anything that you wanted to inside. So there's lots of different ways you can customize this to make it your own. But of course, because today's theme is carnival, I wanted it to be very carnival inspired. All right, is there any other questions? Everybody's good? Good. So if you're watching the replay, remember you can always write me on my personal page here from I posted from, or my business page, Simi Cakes and Confections, with any questions. I'll be happy to answer them. And also make sure to join the Simi Torch team if you make this piece and post pictures, because we love to see each other's projects as I do a live stream like this every month. I do want to show you a really quick preview of my next live stream that I'm doing from my page, Simi Cakes and Confections. It's going to be on June 4th at 2 p.m. and it's going to be perfect for Father's Day. So I made a realistic Isomalt watch. I'm going to tilt it down here. So this is all Isomalt. This is on a real watch stand, so you can see it is life size. But we have the Isomalt watch, and I'm also going to show you how I got the marble for the base as well. So that's going to be our next live stream that I do on my page every single month. I do a new project, and I post the kit for it and everything so that you can follow along with me if you want to. But yeah, that one is going to be on my page, so make sure you join the Torch team for all the details, because I always post everything there. And we're also going to be having a live summer camp as well this summer in July, so make sure to tune in for that. All the details will be on my group and everything as well for that. We had a really fun retreat in May, so we wanted to do a virtual version as well for anybody who couldn't come. And we're also going to be having our next retreat in January. It's going to be our next in-person retreat, so if you want to join us. Make sure that you tune in for all of the other amazing demos and go back to ones that you may have missed this morning. If you haven't seen them, they were incredible. And next today we have Monica Patala, Sid Mitchell, Deborah Coughlin, and Mariana Beltran, so make sure that you tune in. Plus tomorrow there is a whole nother day of amazing demos. So thank you so much to the Frosting creators for having me. Thank you, Melinda, for hosting. I had such an awesome time. I can't wait to see you guys' carousels. Make sure to tag me. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the demos this weekend and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys.